Hello viewers, I'm SB and welcome to this beginner's guide for Caves of Qud, in which I'll be giving you some tips for how to begin engaging with the vast and beautiful weirdness of the Land of Qud. When you start a new game, you'll see a screen that looks like this. If you haven't played the game before, the excellent tutorial option might be listed first over here on the left, and it really is worth checking out if you have the time. Classic mode will let you approach the dangers and delights of Qud under a set of common roguelike rules. The game manages your save automatically, and if your character dies, they and their game world are gone forever. The lands of Qud, and especially their caves, are very strange and very dangerous, and you should expect that you're going to die quite a lot as you learn the game. Some people will find that the danger of losing an established character adds a compelling dimension to dealing with new and unknown threats, but if that's not for you, don't worry. Roleplay mode instead lets you resume your adventure from the last town you entered if your character dies, allowing you to approach the game more like a standard RPG. Wander mode includes that functionality and strongly de-emphasizes combat, making the game much more about exploration and discovery. Daily mode challenges you to play through the game with a randomized character build determined by the day you start it, and I definitely would not recommend this for new players. After you pick your mode, you'll be prompted to create a character. I'm not going to talk in any detail about character creation today because that's a subject that really deserves its own deep dive. Feel free to build your own if you don't mind diving into that complexity, or just take one of the presets if you'd rather get straight into playing. Once you've got a character, the game will ask you to choose a starting location. Each of these starts comes with its own interesting upsides and downsides, but until you know quite a bit about the world and its mechanics, I would strongly recommend that you start here in Joppa. Now that you've spawned in, let's talk quickly about operating your fancy new body. Caves of Qud is a turn-based game. Things in the world will only act after you take an action, like walking, attacking, or doing things with your items. Because of this, the most important piece of advice I can give you for the game as a whole is that you can always just stop doing things to give yourself a moment to think through a situation. First things first, you're not going to be very good at surviving if you can't tell what's going on. If any of these text elements are too small for you to read, or if you need to adjust them for any other reason, you can hit Escape, go into the Options menu, and check out the UI options here. In particular, I know some people find a lot of the bits around the screen to be too small. If that's you, upping the UI scale can really help. You can also zoom your camera in and out with the mouse wheel to help keep track of your character amidst all the action. You can do this with the keyboard as well, but you'll first have to bind some controls for it in the control mapping menu. At the top of the screen, you can see your character's current HP and progress toward the next level. You can also see your character's current temperature, how hungry and thirsty you are, how much weight you're carrying, how much carry capacity you have, and how much money you have on you. Over here, we have your quickness and move speed. These govern how much time your actions take. The precise way that works is kind of complicated, but for now just understand that if your quickness goes up, you'll get more turns relative to the other creatures in the environment, which is an awfully big advantage. Next to that, you have your current armor value, which is how well your armor protects you from physical damage, then your dodge value, which is your chance of fully avoiding an attack, and then your mental armor, which is how well your brain protects you from psychic attacks. Most creatures will just try to kill you with old-fashioned violence, but in the world of Qud, you can never tell when someone might try to turn you inside out brain first. To the right of all that, you have the calendar date, an indicator of the time of day, and the name of your current location. When you're ready to act, you can control your movement with the mouse, the arrow keys, or the numpad. If you're using the mouse, you can left-click anywhere you want to walk to that location, and right-click on things to bring up the Interact menu. This is a very straightforward control scheme, but be aware that if you click far away from your character, multiple turns will pass while you're moving, which might make it difficult to react quickly to some things. The game will stop your movement immediately if you see an enemy or if you take damage. If you're using the keyboard, you can interact with most things pretty easily by just walking your character up next to them and hitting the spacebar. If you're standing next to multiple things or people, you might have to give another directional indication for which thing you're trying to interact with. Either way, one of the most important and frequent interactions you'll perform in the game is looking. With the mouse, you can just select Look from the Interact menu. With the keyboard, you'll often use the Look cursor, which you can access by pressing L and then move around with your movement keys. When you look at something, you'll get a description, and if it's a creature, you'll also learn how the various peoples of the world feel about it, what it's obviously carrying, whether it appears to want to eat you, how difficult it would be to fight it, and its physical condition. Those last few things combined form what I like to call the "am I about to die" quotient, and you'll get used to checking that very quickly when encountering new creatures in the wild. Joppa is usually pretty serene, and you can spend some time walking around and just getting familiar with things. If you hit 0 on the numpad, your character will run around and explore the whole area automatically. You can do this on any map, but be very careful about using it outside of towns. Before you leave, here are some things you should definitely do. Tam the Dromad Merchant is immediately east of where you start, and he'll be a good opportunity to experiment with the trade interface. Tam has a dialogue option that will begin trade, but it's important to know that you can trade with almost every person that you can talk to by just pressing Tab or clicking on this button while talking to them. Tam often has lots of interesting stuff, including armor and torches. He also always has a musket, which I would recommend purchasing with any character that doesn't have any other ranged options. Just select the things you want to buy on his side, hit O to offer him the deal, and this dialogue will pop up confirming the payment out of your water supply, because in the blasted wasteland of Cud, the only universal currency is drams of fresh, drinkable water. Make sure you don't spend it all, because you have an awfully long walk ahead of you. If you walk around and talk to everybody, you might notice that with some of them you have the option to begin a water ritual. The water ritual is a formalized gesture of allegiance that creates an almost familial bond with someone. In fact, after you do it, they'll be known as your water sibling. You'll gain standing with whatever group they're a part of, and you'll take on some of their relationships. People who like them will start to like you, but people who hate them will hate you just a little bit more. Once you've water bonded with somebody, you'll be able to ask favors of them if their group likes you enough, and you may even be able to trade secrets that you've learned out in the world to get them to like you more. There are 3 people in Joppa who have good early quests for you. This fellow, Mehmet, will task you with figuring out what's eating the nearby crops. This guy over here in the rusted sheet metal shack is the local tinker, Argive, and he'll give you a quest that seems awfully minor, just to bring him any little technological trinket you can find, but it leads somewhere that is very worth following. Finally, somewhere in town, you can find this blue farmer with a slightly different sprite from the others. She'll give you a quest to visit the 6-Day Stilt, which is both her religion's holy site and the largest and most bustling market that you're going to find out here. You're definitely going to want to go there, eventually, but it might be a risky trip right now, and you don't have enough things to sell to really make it worthwhile yet anyway. Take on your other quests first. There are 2 statues in Joppa, one in the upper right part of this screen, and one on the screen to the north. You can look at these statues to read their inscriptions and learn some things about the semi-randomly generated history of your game world. The inscription on the northern statue will also always give you the location of an ancient ruin that you can visit. Going there is a really easy way to earn some early experience, but be careful about actually exploring it. Now that you've agreed to help the people of Joppa, of course they want you to succeed, so you can help them help you by just taking a few useful items that are laying around town. They don't even need to know this is happening. Several of the buildings in town have walls that are partially just fences for some reason, but in these 2 buildings, which have proper walls all the way around, you can go inside, close the door behind you, and help yourself to helping them help you to help them. I mean, it's practically an act of charity, is what I'm saying. Just make sure that you remember to close that door. You can apply this lesson in the wider world as well. Anytime you can completely close yourself alone into an area with no line of sight in or out, you can take everything in there with no consequences. Once you're ready to leave town, you can just wander off the side of the screen and then walk through screens and screens of procedurally generated wilderness, but you'll find that's awfully slow going. When you're traveling great distances, you'll want to do it by ascending to the world map view, which you can do by clicking this button here or pressing the minus key. Each one of these world map tiles covers a distance called a parasang and represents a block of 9 screens laid out 3 by 3. The world map itself, and a few particular locations like Joppa, will always be laid out the same, but the contents of almost all of the other screens in the entire world are procedurally generated and will contain different things each game. The safest and fastest way to travel is by moving on the world map, and when you get to wherever you're going, you can just descend back down to the screen level by clicking this button or pressing the plus key. Unfortunately, the world of Qud is a place with very few road signs. Sometimes you're going to get lost while traveling. When this happens, you won't be able to zoom back out to the world map view until you regain your bearings, which you can do by entering new screens until your character sees something familiar and figures it out, or by finding a person who can just tell you where you are. All this traveling is tiring work. If you make sure to keep some fresh water on hand, your character will just drink automatically whenever they become thirsty, but you'll have to handle your hunger manually. Anytime you're not in combat, you can start a campfire with this ability, which all characters have, and then you can interact with the campfire to cook. Every character has the ability to whip up a meal using whatever happens to be at hand, and that'll be good enough to fill a belly, even if some of the things you use seem like they might not be edible. The cooking system is actually very powerful. It can give you some extremely cool buffs, but it's somewhat out of the scope of this video. Feel free to just experiment with ingredients and try to pick up recipes whenever you have the opportunity. Eventually, you're going to wind up in the dark, either because the sun has gone down or because you found your way down into Qud itself. If your character doesn't have built-in night vision, you're going to have to equip some kind of light in these situations. You start with a healthy supply of torches, but they're awfully inconvenient. Equipping one takes up one of your hands, they're heavy, and they burn down over time. Keep an eye out for better solutions to this problem. Here's some additional tips for keeping exploration as profitable and survivable as possible. Discovering locations and completing quests is a significant source of experience, and you'll definitely gain levels running around out there. When you do, you'll gain skill points. You can hit K on the keyboard to jump directly to the Skills tab of your character sheet to spend them. It's important to spend some upgrades on combat abilities from time to time, but many skills are much more focused on improving your ability to explore and survive in the wilderness. Make sure to check out the wayfaring and cooking skill groups. As you learned in Joppa, statues in the environment can have text on them that hints you toward the existence of ancient ruins and relics, which can be very valuable. Also be on the lookout for objects that are unusual colors in the environment, or items that have the painted or engraved descriptor. Using the look command on these can give you descriptions of historical scenes or events that may contain the same kinds of hints. Some of the facts you learn from these can also be taught to others during water rituals in order to gain additional reputation. You should also be on the lookout for books. Books with green and yellow titles contain information about the world and its history that can be very useful. In particular, be on the lookout for a book called the Corpus Cholis, which is full of valuable medical knowledge. Books with white titles are filled with randomly generated text. While they may be fun to read, you're not going to get useful things out of them for the most part. But you should collect them anyway, because there is a person in the 6-day stilt who may value them very highly indeed. When you find an object called something like strange tubes or a weird artifact, you can try to figure out what it is by using the examine command on it. You're more likely to succeed if your character's intelligence is higher. If you fail, there's a chance you'll just break whatever it is, but it wasn't going to be of any use to you if you couldn't identify it anyway. You're going to encounter a lot of weird things in the game, and you'll often find yourself wondering what they'll do if you poke them, or how two strange things would interact with each other. The best way to find out about any of this stuff is just play with it, try things. Put the weird thing in the other weird thing and see if they explode. Sometimes they're going to explode. It's Caves of Qud. Sometimes you're playing with the whatever is going to kill you. But just think how much wiser your next character will be. And, of course, while you're out wandering and getting lost and discovering thousands of years worth of procedurally generated history, you're also sometimes going to run into things that want to eat you. If you want to take a swing at something hostile, all you have to do is try to move into its space. You can press F to try to fire your current ranged weapon, or press the ability number in the hotbar at the bottom of the screen if you want to attack with one of your character's abilities. In any case, once you've engaged a creature in combat, some of its information will appear in the target field at the bottom of the screen so that you can easily keep track of it. Fighting in this game is dangerous, and things can go wrong very quickly, especially at low levels. So here are my tips for surviving combat in CUD. Whenever you see a new creature in the wild, make sure you look at it and check that "am I about to die" quotient. Consider how much ammo you have and how many healing items. You will encounter lots of things in Caves of CUD that you shouldn't fight because they will all the way entirely kill you. So don't be afraid to run. You are not the boss of the wilderness. You won't always be able to just walk away from a scary monster before it sees you. If one surprises you around a corner or gives chase, what are you going to do? Every character has the sprint skill, which doubles your move speed briefly at the cost of making you pretty bad at combat while you're doing it. Depending on your character build and inventory, you might have some other tools, like sleep gas grenades, or the ability to create a temporary force field. Just make sure you know what options your character has for getting away, because you may need them. Hey, you remember that musket that you definitely bought back in Joppa because you take my advice very seriously? The musket has to be reloaded after every shot, and it's both inaccurate and quite heavy, all of which makes it a pretty bad gun, but as far as killing an enemy while he's still standing all the way over there goes, even a bad gun beats the heck out of angry shouting, a handful of rocks, or trying to give someone a mean look so hard that they burst into flames. Well, if you can literally look at someone so hard they catch on fire, you probably that guy's dead. I guess he should have remembered to buy a gun. Especially before you've had an opportunity to develop your skills and acquire real armor, shooting at creatures from a distance is the best way not to end up like this nerd. You're a lot more likely to survive if you're walking around at full health. Characters in CUD naturally heal over time, and especially at low levels when your health pool is small, you can usually heal from a fight by just taking a breather. You can just chill and wait for however much time it takes to heal to full by pressing the Grav key, that's the one right above tab. If an enemy appears during this time, your wait will automatically be interrupted so you can defend yourself. But sometimes you'll find you need much more immediate healing, because an enemy got a lucky crit, or you got suddenly surrounded, or you accidentally used the amputate skill to cut off your own face, or whatever. Starting characters might have a few options for that. If your character comes from an arcology, you probably have some salve injectors in your inventory, which offer powerful healing over a few turns. Other characters might have some witchwood bark that they can chew, which will heal you considerably, but sometimes there can be mind-scrambling side effects. Both of these items may be available from early game vendors like Tam, and if you have the harvestry skill, you can actually scrape viable bark right off of red witchwood trees just by walking through their tile. Try to keep some supplies of these things. Armed with all this knowledge, you're ready to take your first steps into this new wild land, and then to die horribly to some kind of thing you couldn't have imagined, but then to step forth again, and so on, until you finally find what awaits you deep in the caves of CUD. I've been SB, and thank you all so much for watching.